Okay, guys. Uh, I'm back once again. It's been quite a while since I last made a video, probably coming up to about 6 months now. Been on a bit of a hiatus because moving house, also not had great internet for a while at my mum's house. Now I do have good internet, so hopefully I should be able to make more videos and upload on a more frequent level. I've also been trying to up my game a little bit, as you notice. I've got a bit of a webcam thing going on. I've got the article in the background. I'm moving up in the world a little bit. I'm trying to up my game, trying to learn some video editing techniques and stuff like that to just lift up the production value a bit. Because I think it was a little it was a little amateur hour, wasn't it, beforehand? So yeah, I mean, there you go. So yeah, that stuff kind of takes a bit of time. Like I say, everything's kind of been up in the air for a while. So I've just kind of fallen off the map a little bit. So to all my 4 subscribers, sorry about that. Okay then. Well, today we're going to be looking at a article by Gary Young, who is an editor at the Guardian newspaper in Britain. And he's talking about the incident that happened in Canada not too long ago, um, where somebody essentially, basically, there was a kind of terrorist attack. I don't know the motivations or anything to do with that attack, so I'm not going to really comment on that a whole lot here. What I want to talk about in this article is the nonsensical bullshit that is coming out of this Guardian editor in particular, and it's just such obvious pandering. You'll see what I mean in a sec. Okay, okay. So the headline, which should be pretty, send alarm bells off in the first place, is nearly every mass killer is a man. We should all be talking more about that. Why? I don't know. Okay, so it is relevant, I will say, that most of the killers are men. But why, though? But, and we'll get into that. But the reasons that he presents as to why, I believe, are kind of bullshit. And I think I think I have a bit of a better idea of where this might be coming from in terms of like the whole mass killing or just male violence in general. They have changed it though, because there was something about toxic masculinity. Oh yeah, okay. So after the Toronto attack, there should be a debate about toxic masculinity and the issues of identity and rage that turn so many men towards violence. So okay, so you know what kind of article it's going to be before you even have to do it, before we even get into it. But let's read what they have to say. So, from the Oklahoma bombing to the massacre in Norway, it is always the same. The immediate aftermath of mass murder. The initial hypothesis is that it must be a Muslim. And so it was on Monday that within minutes of a van mowing down pedestrians in Toronto, a far-right lynching party was mobilised on social media looking for jihadis. Paul Joseph Watson of conspiracy site Infowars announced a jihadist has just killed 9 people. Katie Hopkins branded the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau a terrorist shill. I will have to say that like them jumping on this kind of bandwagon isn't good. Like, they are just kind of throwing around accusations. I don't know about this particular attack just yet, so I might do a separate video about it after I've done a little bit of research. But if it was a Muslim, then it is probably worth looking into what part of their ideology was it that they were focusing on and stuff like that. Those questions are worth asking, and we shouldn't have to put up with that kind of ideology floating around. But there's enough videos and enough talk about that kind of thing these days, so I'm not going to go too deep onto that. But yeah, I do think, though, on the other hand, though, that these people, I'm not sure how much information they really have on this, but I only happened the other day, and if it was true that it was Islamically inspired, then you know, then I mean, I don't agree with the way that they go about it, but I mean, I guess they're not essentially wrong, but I don't like that they just jump on the bandwagon, especially if it wasn't the case. Then they just look like fucking fools. But you know, but and this is where things start to take a turn. So, but there is a far safer assumption one can generally make. For while a relatively small proportion of mass killers in North America are Muslim, I mean, I don't know why you have to relate it to North America, but I mean, I guess this is Canada now they're talking about, but okay. Across the globe, they are almost all men. Okay, then, so why is that? Why is it that it's generally men that are committing the most violent of acts? It's a very tough question, and I'm going to see what I want them to kind of explain it for a second, and then I'm going to give my 2 cents. So, there will be, though, no appeals for moderate men to denounce toxic masculinity. Well, okay then. Well, you haven't explained what toxic masculinity is in this particular instance. And also, men are not a conglomerate like Muslims are. So, for instance, a Muslim man identifies with another Muslim man because they have the same belief structure. Men do not just have a general belief structure or identity that they all connect with. Masculinity means different things to all different kinds of men, and men are not in it for each other. Men do not go around going, I'm going to do anything in my power to increase the standing of men in society. No, they look out for themselves and their family and their wives and their things like that, right, and their kids. They're not sitting around, or maybe they're friends, but they're not like sitting around like, oh yeah, or me and men, we're all in it together. That isn't how it works, okay? So to say that moderate men out there need to denounce toxic masculinity, as if toxic masculinity is some subset of some masculinity that all men believe in, is complete horseshit. So you're already getting off on the wrong foot by trying to compare it to Islam, as if, because essentially what they're trying to say is that like patriarchy or masculinity is some kind of religion or belief structure or system, and in some way it kind of is, like in the sense that what I believe masculinity to be for me is a belief. You know, it is a belief. And I don't know, in some ways it's self-evident in the way that I am and other people are and stuff like that. So there's a kind of argument to say it's a kind of belief, but realistically it's not comparable to an actual religious structure, I don't think. So and then they say no extra surveillance where men congregate. Well, what do you mean? Like, because men are congregating everywhere that anyone else is. So you meant to put extra surveillance just in general in life? Like, is that what you want? Or like what? Like, if it's a specific group of men, then yeah. But if it's not a specific group of men, you can't just start surveilling all men for the fact that they are just men and they therefore are more likely to commit violent crime. You know, I mean, to be fair, they are suspected more often. So if you turn up to a domestic abuse dispute and it is the woman that's caused it, a lot of the times the men all get arrested anyway because they believe it to be the man's fault. So, and then you go on to no government-sponsored schemes to promote moderate manhood. Okay, well, what is that though? What is your idea of moderate manhood? If you're gonna go into these if you're going to make these comparisons and you're going to try and explore masculinity and what it means, at least try and explain some of these terms and explore them rather than glossing over them like we all should know. And also as well, you're just making stuff up like moderate manhood. What does that even mean? Where that doesn't exist as a thing. You're just making that up for this comparison. But like it just doesn't hold any weight. This comparison that he's trying to make is honestly, I don't know if I'm using this term correctly, but it feels a bit like a straw man, and it just feels really silly. So or travel bans for men, yeah, because there's no set philosophy that all men are living by. Can you not fucking stand that? Like that is the fucking point. Like, if there's an ideology that men followed that said, oh yeah, fucking beat up women or something, that's a core tenet of what it means to be a man, then yeah, that would be a problem. But that is not what it is. That does not happen. Like, in fact, it's the opposite. Most men look in disgust at other men who beat up women. They go out of their way. I know people who have been accused of hitting women, who did not, by the way, who then get 7 shades of fucking shit beat out of them because of it, like, by loads of people. Like, this is not, like, men in general do not look and feel this way. This is not how it works in terms of the culture of masculinity. It's not like a proudful thing to beat up women, and I don't understand why I have to even fucking explain that. I feel like that should be fucking self-evident. But anyway. Indeed, the one thing that is consistently true for such incidents, whether they are classified as terrorist or not, will for the most part go unremarked. No, it's always stated it's a male. No one ignores that it's a man. But what they don't try and do is conflate men and men as a conglomerate, as if they're all the same, as if all the mass shooters are the same, and all the mass shooters can be ferried into one little thing. The mass shooters, serial killers, murderers, rapists, all these highly criminalistic people, if that's a real word, all these kinds of people have different subsets of mental illnesses and stuff like that. Oh, sorry, excuse me. Excuse me, folks. Just need to take a quick break. Ah, fuck's sake. You know what? I'll call him back. It's fine. And I will put this on silent, because that was annoying. Okay then, so they do remark that it is men. They do, but they just don't try and conflate it like as if all men are the same. So like that's where this is coming in, because that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to say that all these shooters are kind of the same in some way. So just by virtue that they're men. So I mean, you're lumping yourself in with these guys, you know. So whatever, if that's what you want to do, but I don't believe in that. I think that's fucking stupid. Obviously, not all men are killers, but the fact that virtually all mass killers are men should, at the very least, give pause for thought. Okay, well, what are those thoughts then? What thoughts should we be having about that? You know, because I'm struggling at this point to understand what it is that you're getting at. I mean, I've read this article, so I actually do kind of know. But at this point in the article, I'm struggling to know what you're getting at here. If it were women slaying people at this rate, feminism would be in the dark. Well, that's because feminism is a particular movement and philosophy, and has an ideology behind it. So, for instance, if it was a load of feminists killing people, then it would be remarkable. If it was loads of women, just women in general, not necessarily feminists, who started killing people, or had been killing people historically since the beginning of time, for a long time, then I don't think it would be as remarkable, actually. And I think this is where my argument starts to come in, that, like, this is nothing new with men, that men are violent, and I don't know how much of a problem it is a problem. However, it is also... then that nature of men has also been the thing that protects people from those men who are extraordinarily violent, let's say. You know, there's the violent men who will fight for good, essentially, and then there's the violent men who let themselves be overcome by their rage and violent tendencies and do different things, you know? So but it's nothing new, you know. So that's why him trying to bring it up like it is something remarkable. It's not that remarkable because we already know this. You're kind of stating the obvious that men have a problem with violence. This is not to say we shouldn't talk about it, but I think the direction of where they're coming from in this is a bit skewed. So, okay. So the fact that they are male is both accepted and expected. Boys will be boys, mass murderers will be men. Well, I don't sit around thinking that mass murderers will just be men. However, I do expect that it probably will be a man. I will say that much. Largely just because I know, I can understand the rage that men feel and the way that it works, but also I do also understand IQ levels. I also understand different things about mental health. Now they're going to talk about mental health in this article, but the way they talk about it isn't quite right, I don't think. So, okay, so this week's atrocity in Toronto, where Alec Minishan, I can't say that, Minusane, I'm not sure how you say that. Alec Minison stands accused of killing 10 and wounding 14. Gives us yet another chance to reflect on the destructive capacity of masculinity. Not least because it may have been the principal motive for this attack. Okay, then. Minusane is not known to have any strong religious affiliations, but according to his Facebook feed, he identified with devotees of incel, short for involuntary celibate. They are also known as a little bit of a laughing stock on the internet. You know, they're like MGTOW types, and I don't know. Personally, I think they're a very, very small subset of people, and a lot of the time, these people suffer from like mild autism and Asperger's and stuff like that. Like, the reason why they are involuntary celibate is because they either have a complex on themselves about, like, I don't know, XYZ things, like they're not good enough or they're not attractive enough or whatever. And then they build that into a complex where they project it out onto, like, women and stuff like that. And honestly, if they were just more introspective and put in some effort, they probably would be fine. But just people, because they get themselves into these little pockets into the internet and get themselves into a bubble, they do become kind of extremist, which is a shame. But yeah, but they are by no means, by any stretch of the imagination, any kind of majority in the man world. They are very much like the 0.001% of men, I would imagine. So, which is for straight men who can't have sex despite wanting to. So, and they split the world into Stacys, attractive women who won't sleep with them, and Chads, men who are sexually successful. Now, it's not the attractive women who just won't sleep with them. It's they don't. From what I can tell of it, I don't know if they feel entitled to the sex and stuff. It's more like they just want to have a happy life like other people do, but just feel a great ineptitude at being able to do it and pull it off, which fills them with a lot of self-loathing, I think, because they feel like, why can't they do it? And a lot of the time, like I say, I think it does come down to them being like maybe mildly autistic and stuff like that, and they just can't connect with people in the quite the same way that other people do who don't have to suffer with that kind of thing. So it goes on to say, it seems innocent and adolescent that that blend of pathos and priapism, whatever that means, that helped get nerdy boys through high school. Only Minusane, okay, so he's trying to say that, like, nerdy boys in high school were like that as well. And I guess some were like that, but, like, I think that's quite a gross mischaracterization. And I think that's kind of irresponsible for the editor of The Guardian to be, or one of the editors of The Guardian to be just flinging around stereotypes like that. Only Minishane, I can't say this name, I don't know how to say it. Minishane was 25 and hadn't grown out of it, but into it with a vengeance. His last Facebook post read, "The incel rebellion has already begun. We will overthrow all the Chads and Stacys. All hail the supreme gentleman, Elliot Rodger." Now, if you don't know who Elliot Rodger is, there is a great a YouTube documentary, actually, about him and about his writings and about his home life. And it's really illuminating. And I can tell you right now that this editor of this has definitely not watched it. But yeah, there's some really interesting stuff there, and I would encourage people to look into him, because I think part of his story is indicative of a lot of the mindset of a lot of these kinds of people. Not always, but a lot of them, especially the younger ones. And you'll see why if you get into it. But I'm not going to go into it too here. But one thing I will say, though, and it's something that is not mentioned here, is that Elliot Rodger is autistic. He was diagnosed with that. So just remember that, because that is not mentioned whatsoever here. In 2014, 22-year-old Rodger wrote a screed against, and among other things, women and couples, particularly interracial couples, before killing 7 people, including himself, and injuring 14 in Isla Vista, California. "I don't know why you girls aren't attracted to me, but I'll punish you all for it," Rodger stated in a video uploaded before the rampage. Now, that is also some kind of narcissism, right? Like, that's some kind of narcissism that he's got there as well. And I do think that, like, things like that show a lot more in autistic people, because they don't really have that filter to be able to be more discreet with it, that maybe narcissists who are not autistic can do that, essentially. And he goes on to say, "It's an injustice, a crime, because I'm the perfect guy, and yet you throw yourselves all these obnoxious men instead of me." You can't see the irony, of course, of how obnoxious this statement is. That the supreme gentleman. But, you know, you've got to look at that and go, hey, there's some extreme narcissism going on here, right? There's no empathy, there's no understanding, there's no introspection. He thinks he's the perfect gentleman. He's literally saying that would a perfect gentleman, a supreme gentleman, want to punish women for not being with him? I don't think so. So he's already warped, isn't he, obviously? He's got a warped perspective. Alexandra Bissonnette, who killed 6 and injured 19 in a mosque in Quebec City last year, identified with Rodger and had been Googling him not long before the crime. Interesting. I wonder why he would do that and why he would identify with him. I don't know if people realise this, but people are actually drawn to other people that are like them in some level or another. So perhaps he was borderline autistic, or perhaps he was also a narcissist. Who knows? I don't know, because I don't know much about that case too much. But it's just some food for thought that is not offered in this article whatsoever. So, with tens of thousands visiting their message boards, incel is hardly marginal. Well, yeah, it is. If you think about the vastness of the internet and the hundreds of millions of people using it, so if you get a message board that has a couple of tens of thousands, that's still like 0.0000 something % of people on the internet. So, yeah, you're talking absolute shit. Though arguably too amorphous and incoherent to dignify with the term movement. Yeah, because it's not a movement, it's just a bunch of angry guys. Anyway, it is debatable how widespread the cult of Rodger might be, but the issues of misogyny and inadequacy that drive men to it characterize a far broader and deeper problem that helps to explain male violence. Oh, does it? Oh, okay. So let's see what you mean by that. So, on the one hand, there is the hatred of women. Yes, but why do they hate women? there's a question that is not asked and not explored. So, if you go into Elliot Rodgers' life, you discover that his mum doesn't want anything to do with him. You also discover that he has a stepmother that he has a lot of problems with. And also, of course, he doesn't have any romantic interests in his life, which can be an extremely frustrating thing for people. So, when you couple that all together, this is something that is never mentioned in these articles that I can see. But what about the relationship to mothers or women in general and the impact that they have had on these men that have shaped their views of women? There seems to be no responsibility from feminist sources or left-wing sources to say that women have raised men in a particular way and they are part of the problem. Not to say that they are the sole problem in this whole issue. However, to ignore it, I think, is quite telling of the feminist movement, that they would willfully ignore the part that mothers play in shaping a son's perspective on the world. And and it is to my disappointment that this idea just doesn't come up whatsoever. So, born for the most part from a sense of entitlement, these men do not just resent the fact that they can't get a girlfriend, they feel women are denying them the sex that is rightfully theirs. I mean, yeah, okay, that might be true on some level, and that is a warped perspective. But like I say, these people are already warped in some way. And you have to remember that a lot of them as well, they don't tend to have good relationships with their mothers, so they feel like they don't get the relationship that they deserve from their mother. And we all feel like we deserve some kind of thing from our mother. We all do, and I think we would all expect that from our own children when we have them or whatever. We expect that our children would expect something from us to have some kind of relationship. And we all know that it hurts people when they don't. You know, people fatherless homes, for instance. If you don't have a father in the house, that affects the children quite deeply. You know, I think this is a product of that. I think it's maltreatment from the mother or other female figures in their lives. I think that is probably more at the heart of the issue than to simply say, oh, they are just entitled. Well, where did they get that entitlement from? They felt entitled to love from their mother. Maybe they didn't get it, and now they feel entitled to sex from women in the same way, because there's a similar pathway there in the brain. So and then they go on to say, and this pissed me off, they belong to broadly the same demographic as the Gamergate movement. Now, this, I have to say, is probably one of the most fucked up parts of the article. That to say that these men and mass murderers and whatever can be comparable to people who were involved in Gamergate is absolutely diabolical, I think. And it's a gross mischaracterization. So this happened earlier in the decade, in which male gamers, it wasn't just male gamers, it was a lot of them, but male gamers systematically harassed female game developers. Now, that isn't quite true, and you're not even given the reason as to why. They weren't just harassing game developers. In fact, it wasn't game developers at the time. They were actually journalists. They became developers later on, I think, some of them. But they were journalists, mainly. And the reason why they were getting harassed and were being hounded was because of bad journalistic practices, where they were basically sleeping their way to the top and not actually getting there through merit. And that was the problem. And this is what people had the problem with Gamergate. And that's why there was so much, it went overboard. People, I will say, because they go on to say that, like, you know, subjecting them to rape and death threats and publishing details of their personal lives online. Now, yeah, okay, that on some level that is true. There was people doing shit like that. However, they forgot to mention that some of the women involved who were claiming to be harassed actually created their own harassment. They created false accounts to make it look like they were, being harassed more than they were. So that's something that he glosses over. Great journalistic integrity there, though. Glad you're covering all the bases. Okay, so these men, wherever they are, I don't know why there's a link to these men. I have checked some of these links, and I'll talk about that in a bit, but I haven't checked that one, and I don't really want to, I don't think. It'll probably be a Gamergate thing, but, oh my god, I can't believe, why is it doing that? These men, wherever they are, now have more political space than they used to. There is considerable overlap with the American hard right. I mean, I think that's more by coincidence than because they fully believe it, but yeah, okay. And they have a role model in the White House in a president who was accused of rape by his first wife. So do you think that they aspire to be into rape? And also, by the way, Trump, they were saying before that incels can split the world up into Stacys and Chads, right? Now, wouldn't Trump be considered like the ultimate Chad? Like, he's always had beautiful women. He runs these beauty pageants. He's got a hot wife, even though he's like pushing 80. You know, like this is like the opposite of. He's like a sexually successful man, and why? So why would the incels look to him to be a role model? That seems a little weird to me. It seems like a bit contradictory, but I mean, it could be true, but it seems a bit weird to me. So, boasts of grabbing women by the genitals, makes up sexual stories about women on the internet, and openly disparages their looks and intellect. Well, yeah, that's true. A lot of it was in jest, and a lot of it was in attack against people who were also attacking him. So they were putting themselves in the arena, so, you know. So it's one of them. I mean, I'm not going to defend Trump that much, but like, it's, you know, come on, you can't just sit there and pretend that it was all just like these people didn't have it coming as well. They probably, a lot of the time. I mean, the rape stuff was dropped by his wife, and she has vehemently disagreed with that afterwards. I think it was more of something she did in the heat of the moment to get at him, and I think she kind of regrets doing that now. So I wouldn't look to that accusation as being the thing. I wouldn't look to that as being credible, because she's already discredited it herself. The boast of grabbing women by the genitals, we all know that was a joke, and makes up sexual stories about women on the internet. You know, I don't know, it's kind of whatever, isn't it? You know, it's not like anyone's disparaged Trump's looks or intellect, is it? No, but nobody cares about that. Anyway, in the 2005 book Trump Nation, the future president tells Timothy O'Brien his favourite part in Pulp Fiction is when Samuel Jackson had his gun out in the diner, and he tells the guy to tell his girlfriend to shut up. Tell that bitch to be cool. Say, bitch be cool. I love those lines. I mean, is quite a tense scene in the film, and I can see why he might enjoy that. I don't think they're trying to make it out as if they're insinuating that he likes it because it puts a woman down. But I don't think that is what it is, because the woman is being quite hysterical at that point, and he like, oh no, it isn't. It's the waitress, isn't it? And he tells her to be cool, but like, it's more. I think what it is the power play that's going on. I think is what he's probably enjoying, and how cool Samuel L. Jackson's character is in that situation. So for them to insinuate that it's like it's some kind of misogyny. The reason he likes it is because he's a misogynist and it's a woman being targeted. I think I don't know. I think that's stretching a bit. We don't know what the proportion of these men go on to have abusive relationships, or even if they enter relationships at all. So why bring it up then? Why is it in relation to any of this? I don't understand. Like, you know, okay, so this guy was an incel apparently, but like I feel like a lot of this stuff that he's been talking about has been kind of irrelevant to the point. I don't think any of it has anything to do with. He hasn't explained what he's on about with this masculinity so far. It just seems to be a tangent. But we do know there is a significant correlation between domestic abuse and mass murder. Okay then, well now we've got to something, haven't we? A significant correlation between domestic abuse and mass murder. Well, could it be that people who are habitually violent are more likely to be violent. Well, there's an obvious statement for you, isn't there? And we probably should be watching people like that. And I would say in America that people who have committed offences like abuse, like physical domestic abuse and stuff like that, should be prevented from acquiring guns. Obviously, they can probably still get them illegally if they wanted to, but I think at least from the state, they shouldn't be getting them from the state. Or if they did, at least have a registration for all the guns in the country, so you know who has what guns and who to watch, who has like a criminal record, because if they have a criminal record and have some guns, they might do some weird shit with it, so it might be worth watching them. And at least then, if they fire their guns and whatever, you can trace them back to that person in particular, which would probably help in solving crimes, because if it's an illegal gun, you can't necessarily trace it back to a particular person, because from what I can tell, if you fire a bullet, it has like not a tracer on it, but I think it has like a kind of thing where it maybe this is made up shit. I don't know. Maybe someone can confirm this for me. But I swear that like you can tell the gun or whatever that a bullet came from somehow. I don't know. Maybe that's wrong actually. That might just be a Hollywood thing or something. Anyway, and every town for gun safety report last year revealed that between 2009 and 2016, more than half of mass shootings in the US were related to domestic or family violence. Okay, well that's a big deal, isn't it? So why are these men so quick? Why are these men involved in domestic violence? I mean, a lot of men, I believe, who are involved in domestic violence have a multitude of things going on, and I think I spoke about them earlier in terms of narcissism, psychopathy, in terms of complexes about their masculinity or their views on women. There is complexes there. I guess that is what they call toxic masculinity. However, these things can vary from guy to guy as to why they end up committing these domestic issue problems. So, for instance, a guy being a narcissist might not necessarily have a huge problem with his mum in life, but because his narcissism prevents him from connecting with people in a proper way and becomes controlling and whatever, he can be controlling to women because they're an easy target because they're vulnerable or whatever. So, you know what I mean? Like, there's different ways, there's different avenues for this to take shape, and it's more complex than just trying to throw this blanket term of toxic masculinity in the mix, because I think it's like you're trying to put a plaster on an infested wound that is just not, it's not going to cut it. You know what I mean? It's not going to help anything. It's certainly not going to help understand the situation. In a third of the public mass shootings during that time period, the gunman had a history of violence against women. Domestic abuse is a more common trait among mass murderers than mental illness. Now, this is something that bothered me, because when they said that, there's like a link. I think this was it that goes into the study of this, and when they say mental illness, what they actually mean is severe mental illness, like psychopathy and schizophrenia and other quite mentally impairing things. However, not autism and stuff, which was interesting. Like, there were certain things left off there, like depression, delusions. There was a few things that were left off there, which I understand them maybe not to be severe mental illness, but here they have used the words mental illness, not severe mental illnesses, and listing off what particular mental illnesses they mean. So, because I would say, actually, that mental illness does afflict most of them in different capacities, because you have to get to some level of delirium in order to get to the point of that, unless there's other philosophical things going on, Like, because I think religion is slightly different, because religion is already a delirium in a way, but if you believe it to be real, then it kind of is for you. So there's it's a tricky subject. It's a tricky subject, but I'm not trying to say that being religious is a mental illness, but it's just a slightly different thing to mental illness. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. Anyway, on the other hand, there is a deep sense of grievance. While most people avoid association with failure, these men are attracted to it. Well, they do wallow in their self-pity, I'll give you that. Their inadequacy is central both to their identity and their rage. They are not the men that they want or need to be. Right, okay, so who gave them that idea, by the way, of what men are meant to be and what kind of man they want to be? Because you have to remember, there is one argument to say that men shape that in their peer groups and their fathers. They kind of give off an aura of what they think masculinity should be. However, there is the other side of things of trying to understand what women want from men. And when you're growing up and you're trying to figure that out, you do have to look at what women's expectations of men are and what they desire as well. And that shapes you as well. And women put that into their sons and daughters. They do it to their daughters as well about what they think a girl should be. So do not underestimate the power of a parent. And in all honesty, we all know that women spend the most time with children in the world. No other people do. It's definitely women who have the monopoly on children's time. Whether it be in the classroom or whether it be at home. Women generally are the people who are in contact with children the most. So we should be looking at how women's attitudes towards young boys and the ideals that they are trying to instill in them. However, that is not brought up here whatsoever. So, well, it is a little bit, but we'll get to that in a second. They do not have the status they feel was their birthright. I mean, some citations on this would be nice, because I don't know where they're actually getting this from. I mean, like, I know that they are definitely entitled as fuck, but, like, it just feels a little bit, I don't know. This is the fault of others, and anybody must therefore pay. But this is where the narcissism comes in. So, you know, birds of a feather flock together, so you might get all these, you know, people are looking to find confirmation bias. So, you know, there's these men who are bitter about their situation because they're not being introspective enough. They find it on the internet and they all congregate together. It's unfortunate, but it happens. I mean, you just have to look at fucking the left-wing bubble, for instance. The same thing happens there. Confirmation bias on the left wing or the right wing, all over the place, you know. People are looking to have an idea in their own head and then find evidence that supports it. And they all do that, so... You know, they're doing what is natural to everybody. So, you know, maybe you don't mention that, you know, so because you can't really account for that. You can't really change that. It's just not gonna help anything. So, anyway, the Amok Man, writes Douglas Kellner in Guys and Guns Amok, describing the man likely to commit a mass killing is patently out of his mind. So this guy says that he is mentally ill. So they now have a citation and a quotation from a book that does say that mental illness is the most likely kind of guy. But his rampage is preceded by lengthy brooding over failure and is carefully planned as a means of deliverance from an unbearable situation. And in some way, is that not kind of understandable? Like, in order to fix this problem, should we not understand that people might lash out because of failure? Like, if people are stuck in a position where there is no way out, then they may act out. And isn't that the same argument that is made for black on black crime in America. People say that for them and make that excuse for them, but they will not make that excuse. They will not make that justification, rather, for these male mass shooters because they're white, largely. So, you know. So, while the desire to dominate and the embrace of failure may appear contradictory, they are in fact part of the same pathology. Well, yeah, I can see that. The rage stems from the fact that the very thing they feel entitled to, women's bodies, women's lives, women's obeisance... Is that meant to be obedience? I'm not sure. Because obeisance, is that not like... What, like fat birds or what? I'm not sure what that's meant to mean. Is not available to them. I don't think it is that. It's that they want to love and be in love, and they feel that they can't have it, and that makes them bitter. So it's not that it's just women. Like I could imagine that there could be even gay guys like this. There are lesbians who are like this, by the way. I know a lot of lesbians, and there are a couple bitter lesbians who talk a lot like an incel. So this is not. This is something that I think can occur in anyone who is sexually frustrated. I think this is a byproduct of that sexual frustration. And I think that there are a few ways to alleviate this. One could be legalizing prostitution. And another could be something that he kind of suggests here, but doesn't actually fully say. And we'll get to that in a second. So they hate the thing that they cannot have. And of course they hate themselves for their inability to get it. So, yeah, that bit is fairly correct, I would say. But again, it doesn't offer any solution, and it doesn't offer any real insight into why these people might do what they do. Because they hate women doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to go out and just kill people because they're bitter and stuff. Obviously, you've said there's tens of thousands of these guys on the incel forums and stuff, but we've only got handfuls of these guys going out there and actually doing stuff. So it's not like it's a precursor, but it is something that has some correlation, I guess. But, you know, if ever there was an illustration of how a system of patriarchy demeans and depletes us all, this is it. Okay, then, so I don't understand how you can say that the mass shooters represent some kind of system of patriarchy, or that the system of patriarchy produces them in some way. And if they do, then what is women's role in the system of patriarchy? Are women also patriarchal? Do they also create the situation? Like, do they hold up the men that they want to be in power or whatever? Like, like, how does this work in terms of how you're phrasing this? Like, I don't think that it is an illustration of a system of patriarchy. I think it's way more to do with family life and early early experiences in the childhood, I think, largely. Unable to take advantage of the male privileges they believe they are owed. I don't know if that is... I mean, like, what do you mean? Like, what male... I don't... Like, do they think that it's... I don't think they're sitting there... Well, maybe they are. Maybe they are going like, yeah, men are owed a wife. But I don't think that they do, because they go out to try and get dates and whatever. They just fail at it, but they're trying to do it. But it's not a privilege to chase women. You know? It's not a privilege to have to work to try and get a woman. You know, to get somebody to love you. That is not a privilege. And I think it's a privilege to have people throwing themselves at you, even if it's unwanted and can perhaps be dangerous. You know, so it's a pro and con, isn't it, really? It's a pro and con. Because if you're on the woman's side of the fence, you know, you've generally got men throwing themselves at you. And that is viewed as a privilege by most men. and then most men see it as a an issue that you would have to go and chase women because it is a massive inconvenience, and you never know what certain women want or what they're looking for or whatever. So it's a tough minefield to go through, you know, and women don't have to deal with it a lot of the time. And men who are inept at it, I can see them getting bitter. Yeah, totally. Of course I can. They feel inadequate and grow resentful, and a handful become violent. Often awkward, shy, and unconfident, they cannot meet the standards of machismo that the patriarchy demands. I mean, do we even have to say anything about that? Like, I mean, you're saying that the patriarchy demands it. Is it a patriarchy in their own head? Is this patriarchy real, or is it like just a delusion that they have about what men should be? And again, how did that delusion get planted in their brain? Where did it come from? Who gave it to them? Was it men at large? Was it society? Was it their mothers? Was it all three? It could be all three. Probably is all three, actually. But it's just like, but it's not spoken about. Just saying that the patriarchy demands it, as if the patriarchy is just, we should know it exists and it is just there, and that they are dictating to men how they should think and feel. I don't remember a big gathering of men where we all started deciding these things. You know what I mean? Like, there's been different ideas of masculinity through history. I mean, if you look at the Greeks, the Romans, you look at Japan, with the shogunate and the samurai. You go all through the Middle East, and you look at the Persian empires. You look at the Islamic empires, the Ottomans and stuff. You look at the Celts. You look at all these different things. There's so many different examples of how masculinity manifested itself in those cultures, and in quite different ways. I have to say, quite different ways, and very different to today. Extremely different. However, a staple of all those masculine traits was violence. There was violent tendencies in men since the dawn of time, and I honestly don't know how you deal with that. Like, how do you really get rid of it? Because it feels a bit impossible to me. It feels like a DNA thing. It's like asking the lion not to be a carnivore. You know, to tell the man not to be violent or to be angry or to have those tendencies is to have him fight against his very DNA. Not to say that, like, all men are just, like, incoherently violent and are just going to fly off the handle at any minute. What I'm saying is that all men have to deal with that, and largely most men are actually non-violent because they do deal with it. And they deal with their rage, they deal with their insecurities, they deal with these different things, and they tend to get over it. You know, maybe they had a bit of an angry time as a youth, maybe they got into a few scraps and stuff as a younger guy, but then they tend to mellow out, guys, over time and deal with that side of themselves quite well. However, it doesn't mean it still exists in them. You know, so men always know that there's that thing that can push them over the edge. Like, if I for instance, if somebody spat in my face in the street who I didn't know, I might be liable to fucking punch that person. You know what I mean? Because there's levels to life that you just don't want to have to take, and you're willing to fight for it. You know, that is kind of part of the men's mentality. And, you know, there are definitely women out there as well. Like, women, for instance, a lot of them will be like, you know, if you ever hurt my child, I'll kill you. And a lot of women feel that way. So what, are we going to sit there and say that women are just inherently violent or whatever? Like, I don't know. I just feel like it's a bit I think it's a bit unfair how they're characterizing violence in men and that side of masculinity. Because I wouldn't say it's good, but I wouldn't also say it was bad. I just think it's nature. I think it is what it is, and I think it can become very bad if left unchecked, or if it's provoked into, like, warped means, like through, say, a neglectful mother or an abusive father or whatever it is. There can be all different things that cause someone to become gradually more violent. So this is the bit that really pisses me off. So They think feminism will destroy them, but in fact it is their greatest chance of liberation. Really? Really? Well, I don't know if feminism would destroy them necessarily. But anyway, let's see what it says. Since the less women are forced to conform to preconceived notions of femininity, the more space there is within masculinity for them to be themselves. Well, weren't you just saying that they... Isn't this a byproduct? Like, okay, let's say, for instance, if we're going to stereotype everything, those guys are trying to live by this patriarchal idea that you say that they have in their head that is just out there. They have this patriarchal idea in their brain that is solidified. Like, they have to be the man of the house, they have to be in charge, they have to be the breadwinner, they have to, you know, be a perfect gentleman, all this shit, right? And then if women are being forced less to be in those notions of femininity, of being the wife, the homemaker, and all that stuff, which is what they want that woman to be. So if there's less of that going on, why would that benefit them more if they feel that way? Surely feminism would destroy that notion because it wouldn't be in tandem. But you're also saying that feminism is their deliverance. So, like, you know, if they just turn to feminism, then they might not be as crazy. But there's also the problem of just male feminists in general. Like, you know, I don't know. I feel like that's a rabbit hole I don't know if I want to get into right now, because this video is already long enough. But yeah, as such, they are not only the perpetrators of misogyny, but the products and ultimately the victims of it. But I think that as much as they could be, they are also the products of their mothers, and I just hate that they believe that feminism is the thing that will save them. However, they do not take into account women's role in men's lives whatsoever in this whole article. And it's like as if feminism is to say, when they bring in the feminist thing, it's like there is no there's no responsibility on women in this respect. If the men you know, just would have turned to feminism, then none of this would have happened, kind of a thing. I think is so misguided, and it just how can it, like, how, not to say that, like, because you can not be a feminist and also not be a misogynist, by the way. I mean, I know a lot of feminists might not think that way, but, like, you know, yeah, you can still love women and not be a feminist. So I don't understand what feminism has to do with it. And if they're already feeling like a failure and feeling like shit and feeling like they can't succeed in life and they can't be as good of a man as they want to be, well, feminism literally all day long just goes on about how white men in particular are just the bane of the fucking earth and break men down to the point where it's like they just come off like they're fucking scum constantly. And I don't understand why these men, if they were to go into feminism, would ever feel good about themselves. I don't, you know, the only way that they could is to moralize against other people who are not feminists. And it's just like, it just seems like you're just so off the mark here. And for this editor here to put this out, to moralize on this situation as he has done, I think is so irresponsible. And this is one of the major publications in Britain that is doing this. They're meant to be reputable. They're meant to be respected in Britain, or at least they were for a long time. But more and more I see in The Guardian, especially in their opinion pieces and stuff like that, I see more and more of a culture of giving into identity politics and all the rest of it. And it is seriously disappointing. And not only is it disappointing, but it's just despicable, because they used to be a paper that used to rail against the ideas of the right-wing people, dividing and conquering people by race and religion and all the rest of it. However, The Guardian does that en masse today. They love to split people up on those grounds and love to put people in boxes, and it has become what it claimed to hate, and it is reaping all the rewards of that, and it is contributing to the disillusion and the dissolvement of British society, because people think of the Guardian as so reputable and lovely because they stand for the right things, they're the good guys, the good people, that they don't even consider for 1 second that they might be being played by these people. But that's all I have to say about this article. Oh fuck! I thought it was an interesting look into, just this whole issue. I thought it would be interesting to take a peek at what some of the major publications and editors of The Guardian are putting out there into the world for general consumption. So yeah, thanks for taking a watch. Please give me a like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Or don't, it's fine, I don't mind. But yeah, I'm Not Chilling, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Flip side.